video I'm going to be talking about why interviews are so terrifying. So I have had some really bad experiences of interviews, and there was one occasion where I was at a university interview, and at the most basic of questions, why I wanted to be on the course, my mind just went completely blank and words were just escaping me. And then I had another interview for my first job in social work, and I just spoke so quickly that they couldn't give me any marks. So on my feedback, that's what it said. And I'm happy to say that I have improved since this time, but there's definitely some strategies that have really helped me to manage the anxiety around this, and I'm going to share these with people today because I just have so much sort of empathy for people who experience this, because it just seems really unfair, doesn't it, that people can be like really nice, genuine people or really good at the job and just struggle with actually getting through this. And I think it can mean that people stay in a job that makes someone happy, or they don't progress towards the things that matter to them because of this overwhelming feeling that they can't deal with these sort of situations like interviews. So I think it's useful to think about why interviews are so terrifying, and I believe that it's because interviews are a form of public speaking, and lots of people find public speaking incredibly difficult. So if you actually look at statistics around people's biggest fear, I think definitely in the UK people fear dying, but they actually fear one thing more, and that's public speaking. So it may sound like it's a myth or that something's gone wrong in those statistics, but actually when you break it down you realise that it makes sense, because when we feel in a situation that we're finding frightening, sometimes that can trigger our fight or flight response, and our brains cannot actually distinguish the difference between a physical threat and something where we're experiencing that same anxiety but there isn't that threat of harm to us, and we're not always rational in our response. So sometimes we can experience physiological reactions of freezing or sweating, almost like we were running away from an animal or something, just when we're standing there and being judged or scrutinised by other people. So when you look into that, it kind of helps you to get your head around why you can feel like this. But most people in those scenarios either lean into it and find ways to overcome it, or they use avoidance strategies. So that's where I'm saying that people just don't go forward and apply for these things to avoid the interviews. The problem with this is that it can actually make the anxiety worse, because you start building it up and think that you're the sort of person where you just can't deal with these scenarios. Whereas actually, sometimes it's kind of like a CBT approach where you have to just sort of gain experience of doing these things that cause you this anxiety, and that sounds really intense to do, but it definitely helps. So that's why you hear a lot of people saying that they go to interviews just to keep the hand in, because it's acknowledged that it's something that's not natural. And also, like I've found that I've started going to a public speaking group, and that's kind of given me a lot of confidence, because I've been doing those groups every 2 weeks, so you're speaking in front of people, so you kind of get used to hearing your own voice and things. But there's other ways of doing it. So one way that I managed my anxiety of not having that feedback that you generally have in normal conversation is by recording myself on my mobile phone, just answers to questions that I was expecting to get. So why do you want the job, for example? You're likely to get that, or what skills do you think you have? You can actually speak that out and just sort of don't expect to go in there saying it word for word, because that can trip you up even more, but just sort of gathering your thoughts around what order you're going to say things in, because sometimes if you do a good start to an answer you feel like it's flowing better. I think that sometimes it's useful to know where your negative perceptions around being judged are coming from. So did you have a situation in the past where you felt humiliated when you were talking out loud or talking to a group? Or maybe there's a reason why you feel bad on yourself, because you have to be careful about the things that you say. So for example, when I had that negative experience at an interview, I thought they were going to say never come back and apply for a job here again, but actually I came second, so it did not go as bad as I thought. And then they asked me to try again, and it was just lucky really that I had that encouragement, because if I'd have just been relying on what I told myself, I would never have gone back and applied for another job there. So I suppose it's just important to think about that. And I think you need to be careful as well not to give too much power to the people on the panel, because I think sometimes you can see them as like all powerful beings like determining your future, and really it's not really like that, because you do have some power yourself. Like, you chose to come to that interview, you choose sort of how much you were preparing for it, and then you've also got some choice around whether you want to take the job after you've been interviewed. So sometimes people say that they meet the people on the panel, or certain questions led them to think, actually, is this the job for me? And also you need to remember that it's not just on you, like they need to ask good questions that are getting the best out of you. So don't always go away from it thinking that you're flawed in some way just because you've not put yourself across perfectly. No one really puts themselves across word for word perfect, I wouldn't say, unless you're like really good at interviews. I think one of the worst things was when someone said that an interview was going to be casual, and I don't know about you, but casual to me does not indicate that there'll be like 3 people sat across from me writing notes of things that I'm saying. Like, that sort of scrutiny is quite intense. Like, I think it's a good thing to prepare for an interview in terms of preparing your thoughts and really reflecting on why you think you're the one for the role. So thinking about the criteria of applying is really helpful, and just gathering your thoughts before you go in. But overall, I just think it's definitely a skill to learn, and it's not something that comes naturally to everyone. So if you're in that boat, don't be too hard on yourself. It's not necessarily an indication of how you'd be in the role or whatever you're applying for. So if you'd like to like and subscribe, that'd be great, and press the notification bell if you'd like to be updated when I put out more videos. Thank you.